important, they're required, but trying to figure out, what are 2 things that would really help us move forward as we go through the year. Does that follow for everybody? And the 2 that I feel like I'm calling them North Stars because they feel like they should be guiding us. One is communication, one is student engagement. So these are 2 that I actually mentioned in our convocation, right? And that I think are helpful to us. Both are broad and on purpose broad. So thinking about communication, we're obviously in this very interesting time with the consolidation in particular. That's an all parties kind of vibe of communication. We want to try to make sure people have the information that they need when they need it. And no organization is perfect at that, but we want to make sure we're making a concerted effort there. Then the other one I would recommend is on engagement, and that's student engagement, all right? And student engagement is a term you'll see in academic literature meaning all kinds of things. And that's on purpose too, because student engagement can be as foundational as we need our friend Patrick to show up to school, right? And to be present in school such that he can learn. And then it can also be more sophisticated levels of engagement, like using very effective instructional practices with a student, okay? So I felt like those 2 goals were broad enough, but something that everybody could latch on to, and were something that we could really, truly move forward on as good priorities for us. Now, they're not priorities with like a dollar sign attached or something of that nature. They're more philosophical priorities, but I think they're a good place to start. You were looking at me with a depth of concentration. Are you thinking of a question? Okay, all right.
I'm intrigued.
All right. So those are priorities I would certainly suggest to us. And I think they're helpful. I think they're things we're already working on. I think they're things that we want to put energy behind. And I think, no offense to the many plans we write, because they all have their purpose, and I want to underline that. But it's nice to have things you can pull out and focus on that can be kind of words that help you center your day. Because if we have like 50 goals, we might not achieve any of those goals. It feels important to me to focus on a couple. Now, those are the 2 I bring forward as suggestions, and I kind of brought 2 forward on purpose, because we could certainly add a third, and I don't think 3 goals is overwhelming. But I wouldn't suggest we go to 10 or 15 or anything of that nature. So pretty simple presentation of that, but wanted to see if that generated any conversations, discussions, if we think we're on the right path there. I'm really excited about the student engagement piece, and I'm really excited that that hits attendance as well as academic work.
I think the communication is a biggie because it keeps people from getting blindsided.
Absolutely.
Yes. That takes the fun out of the day.
It does. It does. And on that point, when we wrote our grant to the foundation to add that communication specialist position shared between school divisions, it was the foundation's wise input that some of that communications responsibility should actually be directed at staff and between staff. Because this is a time where we're juggling a ton of information, and to help make sure anybody, including teacher, staff member, or someone of that nature, has information and understands the priority of that information.
Yeah, the communication thing I think is very important. One of the things that has not been really celebrated is our test score things. That's something I know we've got. I know Sherman's been out and stuff, but I mean, we need to celebrate those wins. So when we get caught up in non-school related things that everybody gets all hyped up about, we can also think that we celebrated some of our positives that actually do affect children.
Good point.
Anything else on that?
Unless there's a suggestion for a third goal, I do like that these are broad concepts, because it helps us work them into other plans. I think that's helpful at this interesting time.
I think, you have to, and it may be broad enough to encompass it, but you can't talk about student engagement without talking about staff engagement, because that's one facet of it, certainly not all of it, but if you have a disengaged teacher that is not connecting with that student or promoting a positive learning environment, of course, you're going to have decreased student engagement, regardless of what other efforts you put in place. So I think you have to almost think about that staff engagement as well, as a piece of that.
Are you thinking about that in terms of like staff training or
Just very broadly.
Okay, all right.
Just as one piece of that student engagement is going to be classroom, right? And how how engaging their teacher is, and if they're not engaged in being there, what's the likeliness of their student being engaged in being there?
Sure. And to that point, and I think several of my colleagues around the state have said this, and I know we all believe this, but we just really want to encourage any citizen you meet who has some kind of good news they want to share with a teacher. Please encourage them to reach out to the teacher and share that. Our staff's working hard, as are educators all around the nation, and it's just those thank yous mean so much.
Sure.
Even if it's just passing somebody in the grocery store and sharing it, it's really appreciated. And I know that's very true from y'all's comments to them.
Yeah, and it goes back to even Jacob's point, by celebrating those milestones and those great accomplishments, that's going to increase your staff engagement as well.
In our last meeting, but as our friends Wade and Patrick probably don't know, when the scores that Richmond posts were analyzed, there's some really good news for Alleghany. So let me situate it in some context, especially for you all hearing it for the first time. The test scores from last year, we all know that schools were not held to an accreditation standard last year. But the federal statutes related to test scores do require that those test scores were published anyway. So there are school report cards, if you will. Student report cards are actually called school quality profiles now. But those documents are out there, and that data is publicly accessible. So if you're interested for any school or school division in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you can find that information online. Well, as that information was analyzed by one of our partners that we contract with, it became apparent that Allegany's gain in ranking was the biggest in the state last year, which is what Mr. Ross was sharing with us a bit at our last meeting. That's pretty incredible. Where that hits my heart is that shows us how hard our staff worked to engage kiddos. And I know that's still one of our goals, because we did have some friends who didn't attend to their work as well as they should have, and that's absolutely true. But we did have a lot of teachers and other staff rise above and beyond and keep kids connected. And that was, speaking as a former teacher, that was pretty hard work last year. Right? And all of us in administration last year, we haven't felt that before, unless we just came out of the classroom. So that was a lot of work, a lot of what we would call differentiation for a lot of things. And teachers are pretty accustomed to differentiating for this reading level and that reading level, but much less accustomed to differentiating for student interests, for their ability to access the internet, for their family's personal situation in terms of COVID. Just, this is a lot of good work on behalf of staff, and staff deserve a ton of credit for that. Now, in fairness to that, it's really important to nuance that data a bit, because that does not mean everyone's test scores are up, right? That means the ranking is up, and it's up substantially. And that's been verified actually by the Comprehensive Instructional Program, which is a vendor we use, and that a lot of smaller divisions on this side of the state use to help them with various instructional matters and curriculum matters. Does that follow for everybody? Now on that note, we're trying to celebrate that, so I love that you pointed that out. Here's our plan at this time. We really want to make sure that information that reaches the press about that is very accurate, because it is a little bit difficult to understand, because everyone's test scores are down. Test scores are down across the state, right? But encouragingly, we have a group of students who are working on how we will celebrate that. So with all due respect for our friend from the Journal, I want to make sure that I don't accidentally blow their cover, but we have some students who are working on a pretty neat plan to help their colleagues celebrate that accomplishment. And we can certainly discuss the board's prerogative about releasing that ahead of that celebration, but we're aiming for an October celebration that we hope will just help everybody feel good and lift everybody's spirits. Is that all follow for everybody? Does that timeline sound good? Yeah. Now, one of the other pieces on student achievement that's just very interesting we have also recently learned is that it does appear that the Department of Education is asking divisions to reflect on their 3-year trend that ended ahead of the pandemic, okay, in 18-19. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what that means. So there may be further conversation about that. I think there are meetings about that scheduled for October. So that's part of the reason for our timing also. So we want to make sure we have it all lined up. And if there's something that we're going to target as an area of improvement, we want to make sure we're honest with the public about that. At the same time, we're honest with our celebration. Does that make sense and sound like a plan? Yeah. Test scores are really fun to understand if anyone would like a statistician job or something fun like that, right? On another piece there, I think this is also related to student achievement and growth. We're really excited about a grant we've received from the state, and there'll certainly be more details about that at joint schools meeting this week.